Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Nelson. I currently serve as the president of NAHSE New Jersey. It is my absolute pleasure to be here this evening to welcome you into our event in honor of MLK, of Dr. King, and really having an understanding and a reflection and having a conversation about the legacy of Dr. King. And one of the things that Dr. King once said was that uh, we as individuals, we as leaders, and we as the people, one of life's biggest questions is, what are you doing for others? As we think about the mission of NAHSE, which is to further improve the health services rendered to the underserved community, and beyond that, to truly help the development of minority leaders into executive roles in healthcare, we are truly committed to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our community, and we are pushing and ensuring that our people and those that are in fact in need can potentially get the help that they deserve to help to move forward. As a chapter, our goal is certainly to help carry the legacy of Dr. King forward and to continuously make improvements and strides as we continuously make major improvements in the space of healthcare, not just in our community, but also professionally. So tonight's panel, we look forward to having a very dynamic engagement from everyone who's currently part who's currently attending, and as such, we would love to move on to our next participant in welcoming Wendell, who will make opening remarks and make introductory remarks to help us in terms of our next steps. So without further ado, Wendell Alexis, who's our immediate past president, will be sharing a few words and some opening remarks for it.
Thank you, Frank. Good evening, everyone, on this very important evening for many of us. I'd like to start off with three things that I would like us to think about: reflection, responsibility, and reality. Starting with reflection, where have we come from? By that, I'm meaning not just personally, but us as a nation, us as a race. Where are we right now? What are the challenges that we're facing, not only personally, professionally, but also as a culture as well? And where are we going? What are the things that we can do? As Frank mentioned, how can we help those who need help? Moving on to responsibility. Are we raising our awareness? The term woke is very, very popular, but I think it has the same meaning. Are we aware of what is going on in our communities, what is going on in our country? And using that awareness to raise our voice, not in senseless yelling, not in senseless calling individuals or organizations out, but raising our voice in a constructive way, raising our voices in unison to force change and to force the light to be shined on injustices and inequities. And lastly, reality. We all are familiar with the battle that's going on right now with voters' rights. Here we are almost 80 years later, and we're still fighting for some of those basic rights. We still are facing inequities in housing, in healthcare, in opportunities. Though we've come very far, we still have very far to go. So as Dr. King mentioned about that promissory note that's unpaid, we have to make sure that the bank stays open and knows that we're coming to receive our just due. So with that, I'd like to turn it over now to Chase and to Sean Matthews. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being in attendance tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to be with us here tonight. And we want to jump into it just right away. But first, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Chase Stewart. I am the chair of membership and treasurer here for NAHSE. And Sean.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sean. I'm the current secretary for NAHSE New Jersey.
All right. So I'm just going to ask a question. And if anybody wants to speak or is interested in answering the question, please just start speaking. You can take yourself on mute and we can do it that way. So the first question is, the legacy of Dr. King, as we know, can never be overstated. As we reflect on his life and his overall impact on society, what are your sentiments on the meaning of Dr. King's many contributions to our lives today? And what does that mean to you personally and professionally? So do we have anyone that wants to start us off? Go ahead, Wendell.
I'd like to start off by saying I think Dr. King's legacy is one of great importance, not only for myself personally, but also for my family. Being a son of immigrants that came to the States looking for great opportunity. If you want to say it was beaten in my head, to make use and make do not let any opportunity pass by without giving your best effort. And I think that is something that is instilled in me, and something that I also instill in the three young men that I'm raising as my sons. Using and letting them know and being aware of the fact that where they are, what they do, what they say is always being watched and judged.
Thank you, Wendell. Judy, why don't you go ahead?
Well, thank you. Well, as I was reflecting on this day, I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. I just happened to be born about 11 years before Dr. King was assassinated. So I guess my remembrance is, my mother, my aunts, they knew people who went to 16th Street Baptist Church. And so that legacy for us was something that we were always taught. It was a driving force for us. And, the fact that people were chased by dogs and hoses, that was a reality for us every night. Though it was happening on the news, we actually knew people who were victims. So I grew up, we integrated Birmingham Public Schools, integrated my college, University of Montevallo, in numbers. And so for us, I think Dr. King's legacy was about education, about being the best for our family. And then that legacy has pushed me on. I think sometimes we forget that Dr. King so preached about love. And so many of his sermons were about love. They were sermons. They were sermons that we heard on Sundays because they were played on the 2 Black radio stations. When I was growing up, they were things my grandmother listened to. And so for us, it was a reality. So his legacy for us, for me, and for I think my family, is one that really pushed us to achieve in Birmingham. Though I'm not there, my cousins, everyone's still there, involved in politics and making sure that Birmingham reflects, the politics of Birmingham reflects the community. And so for me, it's always there. Whenever I go home, I can feel that spirit. So I think it's, this day is just really a big day of reflection because someone said that how can we heal America? I just go back to Dr. King's words. It's love. We need love.
Yeah, and I definitely echo that. And, love is definitely at the forefront when Dr. King had his speech. And you said a very key thing, which was, reflection, right? And, how can we reflect on, what is next, what's going forward, what is Dr. King trying to reflect on us for the future, everything we're going through, what really is next for all of us. Does anybody else have like a kind of response to that?
Hi, Judy. Thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you for sharing that. It's always very different when we say we hear about the experience to have somebody who has lived the experience. I just know from what, hi, everybody, I'm Atia. I know from what I have experienced with my grandparents and the things that they were able to describe to me, what it meant to have someone in that space that they walked alongside of and really experience more than the speeches that I experienced because I wasn't born. But the actual putting your money where your mouth is, putting your hands on the work, doing the work that needs to be done. And I think we kind of take that for granted by assuming that the work has been done. But I think Wendell opened it up just perfectly when he talked about reflection and responsibility, that we definitely have to move in a different space to create, I guess, to show our responsibility or take on our responsibility. You and Sean both used the words love. And before we get to love, I think we need to first start being kind, right? That I think we've walked away a little bit from that. And technology has a lot to do with that for me, that we're not as social as we used to be. We're not as, we commit in different ways. And sometimes that can be misunderstood or misconstrued to not really being present in a moment. So I can appreciate your thoughts and the things that you've said tonight. And I really appreciate you being here with us tonight, Judy.
Certainly echo Tia's sentiments, and Judy, thank you for really your authenticity and for sharing your experience with our chapter. Uh, as I as I as I think and reflect on the life of Dr. King and his legacy, one of the major aspects for me that's often highlighted is really the importance of us as a people to refrain from taking Dr. King's legacy for granted. There are times when we look at some of the some of, I would say, the areas of equity that we've pushed for. In some ways, there has been some improvements in some areas, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in ensuring that our society becomes a more equitable society, whether it's looking at the social justice system, healthcare, education, and any other structural area of society that truly has to be pragmatically approached such that we can have those equitable outcomes. But for us, in terms of where we are today, we always have to be reminded of the amount of sacrifices that were made by those that came before us, and on so many levels, it's in so many layers, in ensuring that, in spite of knowing that reality, uh, and having now the baton being passed over to our generation, making sure that we can continuously move towards a more equitable society and passing the baton to the next generation. So as we think about and reflect on the legacy of Dr. King and the life of Dr. King, personally, I've had opportunity to uh, be in various settings in which, uh, without the contribution of Dr. King, without the ideals for which he had really fought for, I know that I could not have been in the positions that I am today professionally and personally, and even in our living environments on a daily basis. So to the question that was posed, and to the comments that were made earlier, more than ever before, when we think about the culture of kindness, when we think about the word love, being kind to one another, this idea of cultural humility that really entails that we as individuals have to adopt a mindset in which we can remain humble and we can treat others the way in which they want to be treated. And so to me, when I think about that and I think about the way in which we want to be treated versus the way in which others may want to be treated, uh, this phenomenon, if you will, is what we all ultimately are striving for. And as a society, we're surely not there yet, but I do think that as we continue to reflect, as we continue to work together, as we continue to create an environment of collaboration and unity, then ultimately we can get to an environment, into society that's a lot more equitable and fair and just for all.
So is it possible to make a statement?
Go right ahead. Yep.
Yes. Hi, this is Maureen Beverly. I'm a physician, and I just so inspired by Dr. King because he addressed all aspects of human life, be it personal, societal, community, individual. But one of the key statements that I always, just think it so reflects where we are in terms of health. He said, of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. And when you think of that powerful statement and how the accuracy of it and what we're, not only voting rights we're facing right now, but the healthcare of the Black population at this point, the question is, is it still the most inhumane? And I would bear that I don't know if it's still the most, but it's still in this severely health disparity column. And I think as a NAHSE member and so is something that we have to now maybe focus on looking at that and how we can help to improve the health of the Black population. And from my perspective, particularly the elderly Black population, they have the worst health outcomes. And when you think of all the atrocities that they've been through, this should not be the case. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For that answer. And thank you everybody for your answers to that question. If anybody had anything else to add?
Hi, I'd like to add something.
Okay, great.
My name's Robin. And so when I share with people that I am one generation from segregation, my parents grew up under segregation, one from the North and one from the South. And what they both agreed is that Northern segregation was more dangerous than Southern. Because in the South, someone could let you know what they were going to do and they do it. In the North, it was more hidden. It wasn't always so obvious. So Dr. King's legacy is to have a parent, such as my father, who is very proud of the fact that he was there to hear the I Have a Dream speech up front. And it cost him a lot because as a Black man growing up at the time, working 3 jobs to support his children in the projects of Newark, that he had to give up a lot to go there. And so the whole concept of who Dr. King is to us as a people, but also it was instilled in me by my parents, who it is to us as individuals, to grow up in Newark in Baxter Terrace, which was literally 2 blocks from Central Avenue when there was the riots. So I just figured that was our neighborhood, not realizing that it was an outcry. And also going to the South, where my father is from, I am the granddaughter of a sharecropper, and my father did some sharecropping. And as soon as he could, he ran to the North. So how has Dr. King's legacy influenced me? It influenced how we lived and moved about in education. Most of the times, I say we were specks in snowstorms. But how did you carry yourself? Because you weren't just carrying myself or my 2 siblings, we were carrying a persona that we can have intellectual conversations without living into the stereotype. And so Dr. King let us know through our parents who put it in us, and then as we all have gone forward, is that you have a dream and a dream is what fuels you. And my mother's commitment, she said, I will not contribute another racist to this world. And she meant that. And she was quite successful when you look at her children. And so what accountability do I use now based on the legacy? It has influenced my decision. In 95, I intentionally went into healthcare. It was calculated, it was intentional. It was a field that there weren't many people who look like me are in. So I have proudly been in healthcare since 95 and very much concerned about accountability as a professional, accountability as someone who also does adjunct instructions for Essex County College on purpose, because when I go into organizations that cannot afford an educator or someone that brings certain skill sets, because they can't pay me back for what I'm giving, to me, that's giving back to society and intentionally going back to the neighborhood of my youth. And so it intentionally influenced me going into healthcare, intentionally influenced my commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, because I know life on the margins. I live on the margins in so many ways, but how do people feel included? It influenced me going into ministry. I am a minister as well, and I'm a minister as advocate. So knowing that Dr. King came from the church informs me as a Christian, as a minister, that the essence of my tenets of faith is a radical person who, to me, Jesus was diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So it's defined me. And my last point is, when I went to seminary, I went to a social justice seminary, because the fact that I'm on this earth means I have advocacy. And if nothing else I take from Dr. King, and nothing else that I take from Barbara and Mary and Pinckney, is that this life is not about you. It's not about, when you get over you, you can do the work. That's the legacy.
Really, really amazing points, Robin. And thank you very much for sharing with that. And kind of to add to that, we had a really good response that kind of goes hand in hand with what you said. One of our respondents, Robin, actually said the speech was a lot about hope and inspiration and, really doing that call to action for what you're saying about social injustice and racial injustice, right? It really pushes that point forward, and you being that advocate, kind of make that purposeful jump into healthcare is amazing, right? That's what we want to see, and we want to, see a lot more Black people doing that and doing what we need to, right? Yeah, that was really, really powerful. I've seen the responses, really, really great. I'm going to turn it back over to Chase.
Yeah, Tia, you had your hand raised. Did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Robin for saying those things and talking about the lineage that she has, connecting to how our parents held us responsible to what we're doing and how we're holding our children and connecting that bond. I think from the day my kids were born, it was knowledge from the womb to the tomb, right? That we're always encouraging education, always encouraging reading and things that no one else can take away from you, is that when you have the internal knowledge of stuff, right? Whether it's spiritual, whether it's professional, whatever it is, that to seek knowledge always from the womb to the tomb. And that as my kids got older and they walked into different spaces, kids get challenged and they grew up here in the city of Newark. I decided intentionally to raise my family here in the city of Newark. And so when they interacted with friends and interacted with the school based areas, they knew when they walked out the door, they weren't walking out the door representing themselves, that they represented their parents, that they represented the community they came from, that they come from a lineage of people who survived the Middle Passage, survived slavery, survived Jim Crow, survived civil rights, right? And so that they're here on purpose and they have a purpose. And I think when we think about what Dr. Beverly brought up before about where healthcare now stands, again, they have a sense of connection to not only education, but wellness. And I think that we definitely have to, as stewards of NAHSE, as stewards of the being Black here in this country and understanding healthcare and disparities, that our voice have to be raised in a way that we're connecting education to wellness, to economic stability, and maintenance and growth, right? And so I think it stems from understanding our history so we don't repeat our history, that we have a foundation to stand on, to have conversations like this move outside of the Zoom, right? Into actionable things. So thank you so much, Robin. I didn't want to go into that, but I just want to make sure I thanked you for highlighting that very important part. Thank you.
And I just want to add to what you're saying is, now when so many people are beginning to leave healthcare, I think it is the absolute imperative time that we remain, because we have to be the voices of the voiceless. And so I believe, and I believe all of us on here, and I'm making that assumption, is that we are called to help bring people in situations to voice. And if we leave, there's silence. And so we have to remain, and we have to reach out to others, because we're in a perfect storm for this. And you mentioned not repeating history, but there's some history we need to continually repeat, because that's why we're here today.
Right. And so I wouldn't call it repeat, and I would call making sure that it is elevated and lives on, and that we don't forget it, right? And so that it never stops. We don't have to repeat it, because that is the one part of us that we get to elevate. But I totally am in agreement with you, and I thank you for sharing. Absolutely.
Yes, thank you all for sharing.
And if I may briefly, Chase, there's so many wonderful points that were made by both Robin and Celia and others. And just one quick point, I think that Celia already touched on a lot of the points that Robin made, but just one quick other point that you made, Robin, that really stuck with me when you made the point about us intentionally being where we are today, and whether it's within organizations or the various positions that we occupy in life, that we are ultimately here for a reason. And there are times when it may feel isolated, it may feel lonely, and there's a number of challenges that we face as leaders in our various roles, particularly because of who we are, and in our history, and what we represent. And I do think that as we think about NAHSE New Jersey and this family, if you will, the idea of being your brother's keeper and being your sister's keeper, ultimately creating this environment of family where we can support each other and support one another. I do think that's something that, as we think about the life of Dr. King and what it stood for, in fact, perfectly aligns with his legacy. And so, as we think about our various journeys and the day-to-day and some of the challenges that we're facing, it's quite important to be reminded that we're not in this fight alone. And whatever it is that we're maybe facing, that there are others that look just like us that are in various environments all throughout the country, and particularly all throughout the world, that are actually in similar positions. So, but all it takes is, in fact, one person, one leader, one slight of hope, one change agent to really help shape the paradigm, and ultimately lead us into a place where we can go towards equity. So I do think that it's quite important, and that really stuck with me when you mentioned, Robin, that we are to stay and not to leave, and not be discouraged, and always in remaining encouraged. So again, so thank you all for those sentiments, and Chase, thank you for the opportunity to weigh in.
Yes. Yes, I was just gonna go to the next question. So Dr. King once said, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? As change agents and thought leaders, what opportunities exist for us to take actions and collectively create an equitable world where people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but based on the content of their character?
Yeah, for me, I think from the time I graduated from Harry, I learned very quickly that I had to spend my time taking care of others and helping others. And when I say that, Harry, we were a family. We took care of each other. We studied together. We had this sense of community. And so moving from Meharry and going to train in places, coming to the Northeast and different places, you learn to build your family, those people who were able to help you, and then you were going to help them. So we were all successful together. Living in Baltimore, training in New Jersey, and then going back down south to train and coming back, it became very apparent that I had to stand up for people in the communities, working with patients with HIV and learning to advocate. It's real important that we really start to see the work that we do around zip codes, how we affect people where they live, and learning to work in teams, support each other, team-based care. But more importantly, I think that, I have spent a long time mentoring those of academic medicine physicians, family medicine. There's so few of them. So we have to put teachers and support teachers where they're needed in all of our medical schools, and support them. Support physicians as they take on leadership positions, to be there for mentoring, for them to call you in the middle of the night and say, I can't take it anymore, and to help them find a way. And so I think that at this point, as an organization, all of us, we really need to start thinking about the fact, I think about it all the time, that I'm over a certain age, and once I retire from medicine, we will lose a generation of great teachers, great mentors. We will always be here, but we will not be working in those spaces. And so we need to really start to cultivate the next generation and help them to be resilient, because doing what we do is important, taking care of patients. And so we really have, have a commitment to doing that. And I think that that's really the next step for us, is to build a family. I think I learned that at Meharry, to family. When Dr. Satcher handed me my diploma, every time I see him, I say, oh, he goes, I know who you are. I remember you. And so I think that building that family, that coalition, is real important to support each other.
I just want to add, when you mentioned about equity and how to help that people will be judged by their content and their character, the first person I have to start with is me. And it's how I live into that, and how not to be judgmental, to look at that whole person. And so that's the first thing to look at, and how to build others. I spend a tremendous amount of time coaching other leaders, especially leaders that know what life on the margin is like as well. So I do a lot of leadership coaching and a lot of one-on-one. So actually to reflect what I believe in about equity and their character, helping that come to the forefront so that people are not distracted by the color of their skin and so forth. Like, don't get the message twisted under the by focusing on the messenger. And the other thing is, great leaders prepare their successors, and great leaders also prepare those that are going to lead after them. So this kind of is a complement to the prior statement. So how do I live into that? I always remember that legacy means you don't wait until you're gone. Legacy is you leave your legacy, you build your legacy now, so that whether it is I leave the organization or when I leave the workforce, which I'm projecting to do at a particular time. I want to make sure that I've done my best to leave individuals who think the same way and will always remember what I was taught growing up is you always pull someone up with you, your bootstraps. You pull someone with you that, again, you're not in this together. So preparing successors, preparing great leaders, and also to live into the fact that you don't judge people in a negative way, but you do help to elevate them and find their strengths. That's how we live into the legacy.
Right. Thank you, Judy, and thank you, Robin, both for really amazing, amazing responses. To kind of add on to that, we had a really great response from Angela that she was talking about progress, right? And I know Robin touched a little bit on having someone at the seat of the table, right? Pulling someone up with you, right? To make sure that person is impactful towards everybody, right? Brings everybody into that conversation and has those conversations going forward, making sure that we're moving the conversation forward, right? Just thinking about that, where do we think that, what's the kind of the best way to kind of use this speech or use today or use our platforms to kind of make those next steps, to have those conversations and pull that person up?
Agreed, Sean, agreed. Does anybody have anything else to add?
You asked how I feel like I'm talking so much, but I'm excited.
No issue at all.
But how do you have those conversations and have those crucial conversations, first being aware that there needs to be crucial conversation? So it's that awareness. And then creating those spaces for those conversations to happen intentionally and someday organically. And so how do you do that also is you have to have a dream. You have to have a dream and a vision. And to me, that's the difference between, like I tell people, between a manager and a leader. A leader has a vision. A manager just does day to day, but the leader has the vision and it helps and knows who's around to help the vision come alive. You don't have to do it yourself. So be clear what your purpose and your vision is, and then you'll begin to see people differently, and then create those spaces and be willing to be the trailblazer and take a hit if you need to make sure those speeches, those conversations happen. And I did that in my organization when it first came out with George Floyd. And all these leaders were contacting me just to have, off the record kind of conversation. I text my director of organizational effectiveness and say, look, I'm out of circulation for a little while because there's crisis going on. And then when I explained that, then my director, who is a white gentleman out of Newark, he's like, look, I'm not understanding what's going on. So he stopped everything we were doing to have a team meeting, to ask questions. And that's when he realized that those of us, especially those of us of African-American history, how we experienced the George Floyd and just life. I said, it takes us longer to explain the codes of life. And it was to have those conversations with people from different faiths and races on the call. So creating those spaces, having a dream, and then pulling people in, that's how you get it started. And not be afraid to say this needs to happen. And then also encouraging others to have crucial conversations. You have to have a vision for it.
Powerful, powerful. Thank you, Robin. So we have time for one more question. Dr. King once said, of all forms of discrimination and inequalities, injustice in health is the most shocking and inhumane. So as healthcare leaders, how can we, I know we've answered this a little bit, but how can we work collectively, as leaders in NAHSE, to address the disparities that are affecting our vulnerable communities, and what steps are necessary to do so? I think if we can come with something concrete on this call, there there's a strong possibility we can continue to follow through and make sure that it's not just for today, it's throughout the year.
If I can make a comment on that, I think one of the important things to recognize is that the health disparities and with Black Americans, I don't care where they're from, is due to lack of human value. And I think it's very important for us to elevate the human value, you know, and just not use words. Before they had words like non-adherent, so that's a nicer word. I mean, non-compliant, now it's a nicer word, non-adherent, you know. And I think one of the things simple things that we could do that would improve health outcomes is, I'm sure you've heard the word non-compliant in medical in about 20,000 times, if not. How many times have you heard why? So the why question is never asked. So, and if you write non-compliant in the medical records 3 times, that patient is under the health bus and nobody cares about them because it's their fault. But the basic question, but then you have to value me if you want to know why I didn't do something. And so once you could understand what happened, there's an opportunity to collaborate with patients. Because if your perception of me is not the reality, and you're going to treat me based on your perception, then my health is going to go south. But if the perception and the reality is the same, good, bad, happy, or sad, then it's an opportunity for us to collaborate. And I think we need a simple solution, and that's what I do a lot when I do training, is ask the patient why. So I just gonna give a quick example of that. 60-year-old African-American male diagnosed new onset congestive heart failure 2 weeks ago, now returns to the emergency room, heart failure decompensated due to non-compliance. So if that patient gets admitted to the unit, you think anybody's going to care about them? You was recently diagnosed and now you didn't follow directions and now you're back. So when we asked the why question, why didn't you take your medication? And he said, I can't take the water pill because I drive the number 7 train. You know, so I'm just saying, how do we not know that? You know, but when you pull up his social history, it says unemployed. So I think some of the solutions are simple as they are complex. It sounds crazy, but it is. And if we solve the simple, it doesn't have to escalate to the complex. And recognize the role of religion for the elderly Black population is pivotal to their survival. Because, and I'm finishing 2 seconds, when a Holocaust survivor comes in the hospital, we roll out the red carpet. Chief medical officer, board of directors, the CEO will go and see that person. And so they should, because of the horrific things that happened to them. But when an elderly Black patient who fled the South because of Ku Klux Klan, lynching, and Jim Crow, how come we don't roll out the red carpet? And to recognize the role of the religion in these 2 populations was pivotal to their survival. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Beverly. Frank, I know you raised your hand. Do you want to say something?
No, I certainly do not want to disrupt the flow of this conversation, which I think is extremely dynamic. And I mean, to Dr. Beverly's point, I mean, that's so accurate. And I think Judy made a point earlier as well. I think about, I mean, it's just another opportunity for me to reflect personally and also in my workforce. But the reason why I had my hand up, I wanted to really present the opportunity for the speakers, particularly Robin, Judy, Dr. Beverly, and others to really take part and engage as part of our board of directors of NAHSE New Jersey. As we think about taking action to the next step, and I know that as a leadership team, we've talked about the opportunity to extend a collaboration and to ensure that people like yourselves have the opportunity to help guide the next generation of leaders and to also help mentor those that are actually coming up in healthcare. We do feel very strongly that having your input in some capacity, and we can always follow up with a more formalized and structured communication, But I do think that as we think about this conversation, we think about your leadership. We would love for your continued engagement in our conversations, and as well as your participation through our leadership team in NAHSE, New Jersey. So just something to really think about. To we're happy to kind of hear some thoughts on that as well. But we can always take that offline. As part of next steps as a follow up to this conversation. Thank you, Chase.
No problem. Atia?
I'm reading comments. I just thought those were some great points, and that the racial informed trauma is one thing that we don't address as healthcare providers. Just what Dr. Beverly says, if there was someone who survived the Holocaust, but we have not thought about everybody's walks of life. And I always talked about my own lived experience of when my son got his driver's license. I was always saying to him, call me when you get ready to leave the house. Call me when you get to school. Call me when you get to work at the mall. Let me know when you get back to wherever you're going, as he's driving my car. And he would always say to me, Mom, I'm okay. I know how to drive. I got this. And I had to sit him down and let him know that my concern was not that he was a novice driver, but that my concern was how he would be treated as a young Black male driving an Infiniti who likes to wear his hoodie all the time and with his hood on his head, and what that might look like. And so I go to work and have to carry on my duties at work with the thought of what's happening with my son, and nobody else knows that part of that's what I bring with me to work, because I have to compartmentalize that over here while I carry on the task of providing spaces where we are looking to improve equity and take care of the patients that we take care of. And so again, it's so important that we have these conversations and communicate with our patients, with our loved ones, to understand where they are in this part of the space of their life.
Hi, everyone, it's Carlene. I'm kind of thinking about this question and listening to everyone's comments. I'm actually thinking about kind of broadening the discourse and really kind of thinking back on Dr. King's opinions about poverty, and really looking at, there's not just one answer to, the question of healthcare disparities or injustice in healthcare. I really think it's tough just to focus on healthcare, right? And I think it goes back to, I think the prior speaker started talking about, the social determinants of health, and really how do we engage not just with healthcare leaders, but with community leaders, and really looking at how do we address all injustices in our communities. And I think it's really hard to kind of just tease out healthcare. I think it's just a symptom of it, but it really kind of goes back to this bigger picture. And I know the question is, how do we kind of leave with something actionable? And I really struggle with it because I think it's so much bigger than just each of us. And, clearly, something we kind of have to continue a discussion on how to really make big, bold efforts and bring big, bold ideas to the table. And it just, all of the points that were brought up tonight, grooming new leaders, looking at ourselves, talking about love and kindness. It's just so hard, I think, to kind of come up with just one actionable thing in response to your question, how do we address, injustice in healthcare? It's just a tough one for me. Just wanted to share.
Thank you, Carlene. So I'm gonna throw it to L'Oreal. Thank you, everybody, for your answers and your comments. We've taken a lot from this open forum, and just want to thank you all. L'Oreal.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Chase. Tonight, I did not spend much time talking, just absorbing the knowledge and going back to listening to those who have, just really have been trailblazers in the healthcare field so far. It has just been an honor to listen to Dr. Beverly, Robin, Judy, Atia, just the conversation that was had here tonight. A few of the things that I personally learned is that, you know, building your legacy, it does start with you, but it is incremental. It truly takes a lifetime to fulfill your purpose on this earth and to really create that impact. And knowing that although the impact you create may not be on such a massive scale as Dr. King, the incremental steps, every little thing that you do, whether you volunteer, whether you speak up in a board meeting and, you know, to represent for a colleague, any little thing that you do to help create an impact and help your community is completely useful. And just learning, you know, you have to be clear on your purpose, your vision, and be able to have these open forums and join these groups and have the difficult conversations. So I do want to leave you with one of my favorite quotes by Dr. Martin Luther King, is that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. And as we're all dealing with COVID on top of our demanding jobs and any other personal, professional challenges that we're facing, we must keep fighting and we must keep Dr. King's legacy alive. Thank you so much. Atia?
This is what happens when you're typing in the chat at the same time as L'Oreal is speaking. I too have been so enlightened and engaged in the conversations that we had here. We had some powerful voices speak up into this space, and I know there are some others that did not take the opportunity this evening to speak and was probably sitting back and absorbing and learning. I just want to bring us back to the opening where Wendell really led us into the direction of our conversation tonight, and that is about reflection, responsibility, and reality. And no, we can't address or have resolve all of that in just 1 hour. But I think by coming together, and where our president just spoke of the open invitation of people really joining NAHSE, and if it's not to join as a member, but to participate in our conversations like this, to give us some directions, especially here at the New Jersey chapter, of where we can lead into a national chapter, national movement, right? And be aligned with our national chapter. If we think about the history of NAHSE, and in full transparency, I went into healthcare incognito, and I say that out loud, right? That I went through a space where I was just trying to be the best in healthcare, and I did not have my eyes open to the disparity of where Black people worked in this field or where we received the services, right? And it wasn't until I got into a leadership position, although I had worked in leadership for a very long time, that I realized that NAHSE even existed, where it made monumental movements and helping passing bills where we are right now for us to receive the type of healthcare that we receive right now, by lifting up Black leaders, by making sure those voices that Robin spoke of are always heard, that we always had a seat at a table, and that we're always advocating. And I think this is where my call to aligning where Dr. King's dream was, to me, where it sits with NAHSE in my heart, and I say sits with NAHSE in my heart, where I believe is that it's for us to carry forth where NAHSE was birthed, in the light of Dr. King's dream, and to keep on making sure that we have that sustainable leadership voice at this table. And so again, I didn't close out with a quote. I put my quote in the chat, and of course, I just want us to always remember it's not the words of our enemies that will hurt us the most, but it's our own silence. And so that we always find a platform to speak up and include others in the conversation. So I thank you all for joining in this. This is definitely a journey. It's definitely a place to start 2022. And I'm looking forward to the dream realized bit by bit. got to eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? And so let's start somewhere, and let's start today. And at this time,
Okay.
L'Oreal.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Atia. And thank you again, everyone, for joining and taking the time to enjoy this conversation tonight. If you would like to continue this conversation or learn more about NAHSE New Jersey, we are having our first general body meeting on February 16th. It will be on Zoom, and just stay tuned. Look out on your emails, and we'll go ahead and send that information once we have it available. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. And again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for all the all the takeaways and the learnings that we've been able to engage on this evening. We certainly look forward to your continued engagement and participation with NAHSE New Jersey, and hopefully look forward to seeing you on the 16th of February. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.